Hello, for those of you who just joined us, you are in the right place. This is the ElderNet Virtual Town Hall on Senior Hoarding. We'll get started in a couple minutes. And just a reminder, we are streaming on Facebook Live also. And I will put that chat in the link, even though you're here, just in case you might need it for some reason. And the recording will also be there too. We'll be able to post it to our Facebook page afterwards. So right. So I think we'll get started just so we can stay on schedule. But okay. I wanted to thank everyone for coming out. I'm Anthony Johnson, Executive Director at ElderNet of Lower Merion and Narberth. We're a nonprofit agency that mostly helps to support seniors to stay in their homes or active and independent as long as possible. But we also have some programs that are open to the wider community also. So we're happy to have you today. We're in partnership with Jewish Family and Children's Services. So we thank them for their support and for lending what I'm sure will be two great presenters today. So we'll meet them in a little bit. But we will first start off with Tom Gervasio, who is the owner and manager of Bio1 in Chester County, which is an Exton-based company that works on biohazard and crime scene cleanups. He does live in Downingtown, and during his free time, he likes to hike and fish at Marsh Creek State Park near his home. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Tom, and I'll be asking Tom some questions for his segment. His schedule is pretty tight today, so he's going to jump off the call in a bit, so we flip the agenda so that he could go first. So Tom, are you ready for the first question?
Yes, sir, and thank you for doing that and having me.
Oh, sure. So Tom, what exactly is a biohazard removal company?
Yeah, so we do remediate any sort of biohazards, which is a little bit different than hazardous material. It's anything that comes out of a living being that could be harmful or dangerous to others. So, biohazard remediation includes crime and trauma scene cleanup, as well as any, all the way to mouse dropping cleanup. So those are, and anything in between. So when it comes to decluttering or excess clutter removal, a lot of times biohazards can be present in those types of homes, whether it's mouse droppings or other animal droppings, or any sort of bodily fluids from any living thing, from animal to human. So all of that is classified as biohazard.
Oh, and I have to admit, I am a big fan of that show Hoarders on A&E. Okay. I'm not sure how true to life it is, even though it is, reality TV. but I'm sure they, gussy up some parts of it for TV or edit some parts out. But when you see houses that have those really extreme biohazard situations where someone like your company has to come in, it's just amazing that, people are able to live in that.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate, and a lot of times it's a very sad story of how the person had got to that. Regarding the show, I'll let Annie kind of answer those questions. She's had association with that. So I don't watch it. I live it, so I don't need to watch it. But I've heard it's a little bit of an experience to be on it. But as far as the houses, it is very sad and sometimes extremely shocking to see how people are living. But it never seems intentional. It's just something that whether someone has a physical disability or a mental illness that leads to it, and usually it stems from some sort of trauma, whether it's a physical or an emotional trauma, that leads to these tendencies of not being able to let things go, excess clutter, and then it just becomes so overwhelming that they can't handle it themselves. There's also a lot of shame and embarrassment, which if they need plumbing fixed or if they're a renter, they don't want to let anyone in their home once it gets to a certain point. So then it just kind of snowballs. So, unfortunately, it is a sad situation when houses get to this, but that's why we do what we do and why our company exists, is to try to help people get back to a safe and livable environment.
And how does your service work actually? Do you arrive on site that day and figure it out as you go, or do you do pre-planning?
So we handle all the logistics involved, whether it's dumpster arrangements, but yeah, usually the first step is getting a call, whether it's from the person who is in the home living that way, or most of the time it's a family member. That either a family member, their family member has either passed away or got injured or in the hospital, and they become aware of the situation. A lot of times people face the municipality condemning their home or an eviction. So that's usually when I get that call, and we'll go and do a site visit. I do a walkthrough. We try to come up with a mutual plan as what the end goal is. Obviously they want to declutter, but it's not a situation where we're going to come in and throw out everyone's personal items. We help sort. We'll take our time. There are things, there's heirlooms, there's legal documents, there's jewelry, there's family photos. None of that wants or should be thrown away. So we work with the client to sort through the stuff, create separate piles of keep versus donate versus disposal. Sometimes people want like an estate company to come in and resell stuff for them. So any type of scenario, we try to help with. So first step is the walkthrough. Then it's proposal, quoting time, and then we get started. We arrange. It's rarely, hey, I need you to start today, unless someone is facing eviction or a condemned situation within a day or two, which is not common. Usually we have time and try to schedule it.
Yeah. And some of these biohazard cleanups or biohazard situations can structurally harm a house.
It can, yeah. I mean, because a lot of time, it's not just from the weight of the items, but if someone is in the situation that they're in where they have limited mobility and can't get to areas of their home, if a pipe bursts and water leaks, that'll lead to structural damage for sure. And a lot of times people can't access the area they need to get to in order to address that situation. And then, like I was mentioning before, there's a lot of like shame and embarrassment. They don't want to call a plumber, but that's a type of event that does lead to someone finding out, because they also can't have water destroying their house. So yeah, I mean, I've worked on houses that were condemned for structural situations, not just uninhabitable. That's the other category where it's not a safe and livable environment, and then there's structural. So yeah, it absolutely can lead to that.
And I'm sure it could be devastating when it gets to that point if there are significant home repairs needed and the family isn't expecting that. Definitely the hoarder probably isn't expecting that. So.
Exactly. Yeah, and you know, it again, you know, my house, if a pipe bursts, I'm calling insurance. You know, a lot of times that won't help because of the state of the house. It might, you know, change the coverage, seeing the
Mhm.
house as it is. So again, it just snowballs and keeps getting worse. So that's why, you know, the sooner the better. But it's you know, you have to convince someone or have someone realize they need that assistance.
And sometimes you'll come across hazmat situations in a residential home.
Yeah, so again, like biohazard and hazmat get grouped together. To me, you know, in this world, biohazard is like blood, bodily fluids, feces, any bodily fluids that come out of a living thing gets classified as biohazard, and that's where we will wear those full body suits, respirators, even you know, animal droppings. Cat urine is a very big thing we come up against, and you know, cat urine has a very strong ammonia smell. It's very potent and it can be damaging to your lungs. So in that situation, we do need special cartridges on the respirators and those specialized PPE, obviously gloves and N95 minimum, shoe covers, but all the way up to full body suits, full face respirators. You know, hazardous materials, stuff, you know, if they have it, yes, but we address and dispose of biohazard. It can't just get thrown out in the trash. A lot of times, you know, it can't just get thrown out in the dumpster. Even if we spray it down, it needs to be treated as medical waste, which means it's got to be incinerated and has to go to a special facility.
Well, I know when people hear about your line of work, you probably get asked a lot, what's the worst you've ever seen? Or what's some, you know, like I've been waiting to ask you this ever since you agreed to be a panelist. So,
Yeah,
you
you
know,
know, that is a common question on both the hoarding and the crime scene, you know, and trauma scene side. You know, worst, the hardest cleanup, I'll say, because, you know, there are worse situations where it's a much more traumatic situation and that's harder to me, you know, but the most laborious one, I mean, the worst one, I mean, it takes, you know, 10 days to clean out 7 30-yard dumpsters. There was no running water, so you know, person was using 5-gallon buckets as a toilet, and you know, they didn't even remove it after they used it, and it's still in their living room. You know, those are the situations that become the hardest. You need specialized equipment. You need people who are certified to do that type of work. So, you know, I've had several of those. One in particular I can think of is a recent one where it's the only reason I'll say I'm putting it aside is that it just took the longest. We filled up over 2 30-yard dumpsters just from the yard. And then we worked our way into the house, which we had another 5 or 6 once we got into the house. So it was just the sheer volume. And it was out in like a farm house in the middle of nowhere that I'd never even heard of the town. And so there's no one driving by, there's no one checking in. This person lived by themselves. So, you know, that's why I could get to that level. Usually, if someone has a neighbor, they'll call and complain about buildup outside their home, and then code enforcement will come out or firemen will come out. So yes, so this got particularly bad because there was rarely anyone around.
oh, my colleague actually asked, how would they notify?
What do you mean? How?
In that case, how did you find out?
How did Bio One find out about it if the neighbors
So,
aren't nearby?
yeah,
And
so it was the typical situation. That person, while they lived that way, still showed up to work, had a job, wore a suit to work every single day. So what they would do, so amongst all of this, you know, trash and disposable debris, there was dry cleaned suits, and this person would crawl through their window, go shower at like a gym or something, and show up on work to work every single day. No one had any idea in his world outside of the home. Unfortunately, he suffered a stroke. He's still with us, but you know, when he didn't show up to work, his job called his emergency contact, who called local police, who did a wellness check, found him, and once someone who works at a government like fire or police, they have to alert code enforcement and the municipality to alert them of how the state of the house is. And that's how it was facing being condemned, which it absolutely should have been. But they allowed us to go in and clean it out before they actually threw a padlock on the doors and said, you're no longer allowed to come back into this house until it's remediated. And then it's a longer process once it's condemned. So that's how, and that's a very common situation where either the person unfortunately passes away and is found out, and then someone goes, a family member sees the state of the home, had no idea, then they Google it, and that's how they find me. Sometimes I'm referred by code enforcement because I do try to network with as many government agencies, law enforcement, code enforcement, township managers, social workers, professional organizers, anyone that's involved in this type of work, Department of Aging, they sometimes refer me when they have someone who, comes into their realm and they know who I am and what I do. A lot of times I get calls just from Google. Someone types in, hoarding cleanup. I hopefully come up number 1 or 2 or 3, and they find me that way. So most of the time it's when someone passes away or something like that, where there's an injury and they call for help because they can't get up or something. And that's when it's like back against the wall. They enter the home to be removed, EMTs, and that's when it's revealed what the state they were living in.
Well, as we wrap up with you, I did want to ask you one more question before you tell us about Bio One and how we can, get a hold of you. You're part of a group or task force in Chester County.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. And Annie and I are both participants in it. And it's basically just a group of people who work in this who work with these types of people that struggle with this, mental illness or situation. And, we just, from clean out to organization to therapy, it's just a group of people that come together to try to be a resource for anyone who's suffering in this type of scenario. And, it is unfortunately common enough that a task force is needed. So, it's just a nice group of people who want to help anyone in this type of situation that, volunteers their time to get together and discuss what can we do, how do we get out there more, and help as many people as possible.
Great. Oh, and what's the name of the task force again?
It's the Chester County Hoarding Task Force.
Chester County Hoarding Task Force.
Yep.
Thank you. And before you go, I know you're fresh off travel, so thank you again for being making your commitment to sit on the panel. But can you tell us more about how to get in touch with you at Bio One?
Yeah, so the company is called Bio One of Chester County. We are mainly a crime and trauma scene cleaning company. So in the aftermath of an unfortunate passing situation, undiscovered death situation, we do the remediation. If those events can sometimes be covered under insurance, we'll work with the insurance company directly. For hoarding and excess clutter removal, it rarely is, because it's not an event that is usually covered. It's a long period of time build up, so it doesn't fall under their coverage. But we probably do that work more than anything else. To find me, I have a website. It's bio1chestercounty.com. I have a Facebook profile. I have an Instagram profile. So, you can contact me anyway. The number on my website gets routed to my cell phone. I answer every call that I can. If I don't answer, it's because I'm doing something like this. My phone has already rung while I'm on here. So I call back myself. So, people will talk to me. And I have a great crew that is always ready and willing and able to help anyone at any time of the night. When some unfortunate things happen and emergencies come up, they've been with me for several years now. So that's the best way to contact me, is to go to the website. You'll talk to me directly, and then I usually can be contacted through text but I have to give you my direct cell phone, which I do on the phone after that first call. But the number on my website will always get routed to my cell phone.
And I know we've mentioned Chester County a lot during our talk, but you do service Montgomery County.
All of Eastern PA. So from Lancaster, I've gone to the Poconos, I've gone to Delaware, I've gone to South Jersey. So anywhere in that circle, in that radius from Lancaster to Bucks County, Philly, definitely Montgomery County, Chester County, and Delaware County is where I get the most calls from and where I service the most often. But we will travel and go, several hours to get a call. I don't have, an exclusive border that I won't go past. If I just, my targeted marketing, let's call it, is within that eastern, southeastern, specifically Pennsylvania area.
Well, I'll just make sure there's no one with questions for Tom before he jumps off.
I have like 10 or 15 more minutes if it warrants it. So
You'll be all right.
I hope people do ask questions.
Okay. Oh, we do have a question.
So, with the family member.
Oh, okay. So my colleague Michelle, and I should show her, I'll turn the laptop around so you can see her, but she asked, what happens if the family member knows that there's a problem at the house and they need to get in, but the landlord won't allow access?
The actual resident, the person who's.
Oh, the actual resident won't allow access.
So when I get a call from a family member that says, my brother, my dad, whatever, is struggling with a hoarding situation, but he's not on board, it's tough. I mean, it's technically their stuff. So I always said, they need to be on board for me to come and do a walkthrough, but I'm happy to speak to that person. I want them to be comfortable with me as much as me being comfortable with doing the job. So, I always try to push, let me talk to them. I'm happy to come out and meet them in person without going into the house, just so that they can get a feel for, what I do and how I go through the process. A lot of times people are worried that I'm just going to come in and throw out their entire life. And that's never the case. So, if they don't give me permission, I can't force entry, and I won't. And, even if someone that says the resident of the home is in the hospital and I get called from a family member that's like, I want to do this while they're in the hospital, I will still say, are they on board with it? Are they aware of it? Because the sneak attack that I call it, it doesn't help. It ruins relationships. I won't do it anymore. I did it early on just because I didn't know better. But as soon as I saw what it did to one situation, I will never do that again. I don't recommend it. I tell them, when the person needs to be aware of it, and this was it was still like a guardianship power of attorney situation. So legally there was nothing wrong with going in and doing it, but it's still, it doesn't solve it. It's not like once the clutter is removed, the person's cured. There's still several steps and many, many years potentially of, therapy or ongoing organization in order to get someone to, start thinking about the way they live differently. So, I don't know. I hope I answered the original question, but when it's a family member calling on someone else and they are not on board, I can't do anything and I shouldn't do anything.
And she's nodding her head, so I think you answered her question.
Sometimes I rant so long I forget the question.
And any other questions before we say goodbye to Tom? Or you could always put them in the chat if he's off by then, we'll make sure that, we get him the question and your contact information so he can reach back out to you.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you again, Tom, so much.
Oh, no, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate doing this. I'm happy to do it anytime. I'm sorry I have to run for an appointment.
Yeah. Duty calls, right?
Yep.
Sure does.
Well, thank you again. And so now we'll move on in the program where we'll speak with two social workers or two human services agents who are seeing it firsthand. They were working with families, and they actually go out and educate the public about what signs to look for with a hoarder and some tips and resources that might be helpful. I know here at ElderNet, we have two on-staff social workers, and they report when they are doing intake processes with their clients or participants that they're hearing more about hoarding, and that issue does come up as they do an intake process. So it's definitely a topic that's becoming more and more prevalent. I know Lower Merion Police Department has contacted us at least twice now for two separate cases that they're working on, where there's an extreme hoarding situation, and they're just looking for any help on how to move forward with that, because a lot of police officers aren't trained in how to respond to a hoarding situation. So we're glad to be able to offer our help. Our social workers are, and this webinar will be valuable to them too. I'll make it required viewing for them next time when they call. But let me introduce our next two. So we have Jasmine Romero, who is she has her MSW in clinical social work from Widener University and a bachelor's degree in human services. She's been with Jewish Family and Children's Services since December 2019 and has experience working with individuals who present hoarding behaviors and works with them one-on-one in their homes and in group settings as a group facilitator, such as Buried in Treasures, general monthly hoarding drop-in groups, and Facebook Live webinars even, just to name a few. So we have Jasmine, and then Jasmine has brought along her colleague, Gabe Halperin Goldstein, who is a newly minted college graduate. Congratulations, Gabe. And Gabe just presented, I understand he's new with the agency, and he just presented with Jasmine for the first time out in Pittsburgh recently. So he's definitely getting his feet wet. So I can't wait to hear from both of them more. So welcome, Jasmine and Gabe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Glad to be here. So we're gonna present with a slideshow for you all. And Gabe's gonna do the slideshow clicking for me.
Okay, can you all see this? See the screen, okay?
Yes.
All right.
Great. Okay. So we're just gonna talk a little bit about what hoarding disorder is first, and then what we do at JFCS, and then talk a little bit about the current research trends, the trends in treatment that we employ at JFCS, the treatment modalities, and some of the recommendations. We also are going to talk a little bit about how we apply those treatment modalities, how we apply our sorting sessions, some of the assessment tools that we use in the practice, the group work such as Buried in Treasures, and then engaging in the individuals in best practices. So what is hoarding disorder? So basically in the DSM-5, they list it as difficulty discarding. It's the accumulation of stuff that prevents normal use of space. It's a distress of impairment, not some other medical condition, and it's not some other mental health condition. But I would also like to let you all know that before 2013, it was not listed in the DSM-5 as a mental health condition. It was a subcategory of OCD. It did not have its own diagnosis before 2013. So it's pretty recent. It's only been in the DSM-5 for the last 10 years. And it cannot be considered a primary diagnosis if it's with a co-occurring disorder. So, okay. So the hoarding prevalence, basically it's estimated that there are hoarding behaviors affect between 2 to 6% of the population, and the rate is about 5% of the rate is 2 times the rate of OCD and 4 times the rate of bipolar and schizophrenia. So in Philadelphia, County, this is between 23,600 and 59,000 adults. Hoarding behaviors usually start in adolescence and can often become more problematic with age. So the reason that with adolescents, it can be controlled more because usually adolescents live with someone else, but you see a spike as the older you get, because usually, you go off and you start to live alone, or you become older, you see a spike, and usually also the trauma. So you see a spike as you get older. We don't know the frequency of hoarding, but studies indicate that hoarding behaviors, it is 2 to 6%, but we don't know for sure. So let's talk about the co-occurring disorders. I'm sorry, I cannot speak today. Those co-occurring disorders are depression, social phobia, like I said before, OCD, some personality disorders, generalized anxiety disorder, schizophrenia, ADHD, eating disorders. There can be brain injuries, traumatic life events, but not PTSD. There can also be dementia, developmental disabilities, and some organic mental disorders. So 75% of individuals with hoarding disorders have a co-occurring disorder. So like when I go out to see people one-on-one, usually they do have a co-occurring disorder, and that can be like a schizoaffective disorder, depression, bipolar, multitude of different disorders. So some of the hoarding risk factors, age, race, ethnicity, gender, income, and some other contributing factors, and it's a universal phenomenon. So it's important to remember that there is not a typical description of a person who hoards. So a hoarder can come from all backgrounds, ages, socioeconomic status, gender, ethnicity, and race. And I can tell you that every client that I've seen that has had a hoarding disorder, they have come from all different socioeconomic backgrounds. I have seen people in small apartments, and I have seen people in very large, beautiful houses out in the suburbs. There really is no typical description. When you think of a hoarder, or if you've seen someone on the show that they've made it seem like this is the typical hoarder, it's not that way. It's all different socioeconomic backgrounds. So why hoarding disorder? So the PHTF, that stands for the Philadelphia Hoarding Task Force, recognizes the impact of hoarding on the individual and the community. So for the individual, this is like conflict with loved ones over clutter. There's a risk of death, injury, or serious health condition. They can be overwhelmed and exhausted by their clutter. They're unable to do simple things like prepare food on their stove, or even store their food in their fridge. It's affecting their daily life, so they're unable to have friends and family visit. There's a risk of a citation or eviction. The landlord has come by and they realize they can't get in the home, and so they're trying to evict them. There's utilities shut off. They're unable to return home after a hospitalization. There's financial problems due to cost of acquiring and storing belongings. There's mental health problems, especially depression, and I'm sorry, I don't remember his name that he just presented, but he mentioned shame, embarrassment, and defensiveness. But for the community, there's also issues like I mentioned before, landlords and neighbors. There can be disrepair of the home, maintenance issues and hazards, infestations such as roaches or bed bugs. Tom, thank you. Code enforcement such as, and Tom mentioned this also, structural damage to the home. He mentioned water damage, but there can also be, like Tom mentioned before, animals like cat urine can be one, or cat feces or other animal excrements, seeping through the floors. Eventually, if that's not cleaned up, I've seen this firsthand, that especially if the floors are wooden, and you're not living on the first floor, that can seep into the floor eventually and weaken the structure of the floor. And if you're heavy enough, you can fall through, and the house can become condemned. Emergency responders, fire hazards. I've been in a home where, the fire department has had to come out and, inspect, and has said, this is a fire hazard. And if these boxes and papers are not cleaned up and something sparks, then you're in trouble. You could not only, and a lot of places in Philadelphia are row homes. So if your place catches on fire, the next home is going to catch on fire, and the next home is going to catch on fire. And that's a citation right there. This is in the way, I'm sorry. Access for medical personnel as well. So the egresses in the home, and by egress I mean pathways in the home, have to be a certain feet wide. So I believe it's 3 feet wide, so that medical personnel can get in to and from the home. So the front entryway as well as the back, there has to be a back entryway, and windows have to not have items and boxes in the way, so that if you can't get out through the front and back door, you're able to get through a window if you're on the ground floor, if in the event of a fire or some other emergency. So those have to be clear. There's also senior services, removal of older adults, delayed discharge from hospitals if you're not able to come home, which I've also experienced with some clients. There's also child protective services that can be involved, removal of children, which is never a good thing. And then animal protective services. I've never experienced that, but I've helped another colleague who has done a safety day. She was not able to return to her home, but she had 4 cats that had to be caught in her home, that had to be taken out of the home and put into SPCA before we could do a clean out of her home. So the origin of the program, so JFCS, Older Adults Care Management Team, this was before I even started in 2019, identified the hoarding disorder as an ongoing concern impacting the aging population from aging in place. So the care managers often assisted with clean out services, extermination services, and referrals to other services. But they also identified this as a need to be addressed and understood the complexity of hoarding disorder. So they wanted to put a team together to better address this need. So in 2014, JFCS sought out funding to develop a program, and the rest is history. So this is kind of what we talked about before, some of the issues that would be in just a room. Hoarding may impede some first responders from getting in. There may be clutter that block exits in case of an emergency. These are just like, when I go into a home, these are some of the things that I look for during an initial assessment, and some of the things that I might address with a client. Things like untreated moisture may weaken floorboards, heavy loads may lead to a collapse, like boxes. They can't be more than 3 or 4 feet high. We don't want anything to collapse on them or an animal. Covered heating vents may cause fires. Also things on top of stoves or near radiators or other heating sources. Biological fluids may contain pathogens, kind of like what Tom was talking about before. We don't want fluids or excrements or something like that. They have to be cleaned up. If there's anything over here. Nope, there's nothing over here. So yeah, those are just some of the main things that we start out with before we get into working on sorting and discarding with an individual. So some of the types of interventions that we deal with for a client, primarily in the home, are clean outs and then the person and the home. So safety days, that's kind of like a last resort. Safety days are major cleanouts. It should be used sparingly. We usually do those, and we work with a client. We have the client in mind through every step of a safety day. So we go through every room in the house or the apartment with the client, what they want to save, what they want to donate. Safety day usually involves an outside, kind of like a company like Tom has, or a junk removal service. That is, like I said, a last resort. Usually the client is there if they don't want to be there, but it is usually a traumatic experience. We try not to make it a traumatic experience for the client, but that is a total clean out. And that's usually if the client is either experiencing eviction, or they're in danger of an eviction, or their safety is at risk. So that is something that is used as a last resort. Harm reduction through adaptive skill building is something like sorting and discarding. That's something we work on to build up their skills so that they can do that on their own eventually. And reducing acquisition as well. Exposure therapy and support groups. That's something that we'll talk about. That's like buried in treasures. Other support groups that I'll go over in another slide, and primarily the person. So cognitive behavioral therapy, motivational interviewing, psychotherapy, mainly like, and medications don't normally work. Psychotherapy and medications, it's kind of like an outside thing. We're not clinicians, so we don't prescribe medications, and we don't do counseling. So, I mean, that's up there, but that's something that they would seek outside of us.
All right. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about more specifically some of what we do in the JFCS hoarding intervention programs. So like Jasmine was saying, there's the interventions on the person, interventions on the stuff, and then interventions on both. And so we try to focus on the person in their home, not just on their stuff. Like Tom was saying, just getting rid of a person's things won't necessarily solve the issue. We try to work with the person to help them learn how to make decisions about their items, build the skills that they need to keep their home in a state that is safe and comfortable. And so we start with our individual care management clients by doing an assessment where we learn more about their relationship to their items, the ways that their items are getting in the way of their daily living, the safety issues that they may be confronting in their home, their past attempts at cleaning and receiving support from others and how that went. And so this just gives us an idea of what challenges they're working with and more information about how we can work with them. And then we make a treatment plan where we decide together how we're going to take on the challenge at hand. We try to break it down into small parts so that instead of trying to clean everything at once, we'll like start with the living room. We'll start with a couch in the living room and then move on to something else so that they can take it in bite-sized pieces. And then we have regular evaluations where we use some scales that we won't go over today, but they help us understand things like the sanitation issues in the home, the ways that the clutter is interfering with daily living, another scale that asks them to match up pictures of homes with the state of their current home. And these are always to kind of keep track of how they're progressing and check in with these issues as we go along. And so the overall goal is that people can be in their home and it's safe and they don't have to leave their home and they can be comfortable and safe in their home. There are a number of different support groups that we have, which work with people aside from our individual case management. These are really good opportunities for people to meet others who are going through a similar thing that they are and not be isolated in their experience. Buried in Treasures is the most frequent group that we have, which is a 16-week group designed for peers to support one another. Right now, we have our first group led entirely by peer supports. And then Finders Keepers is a group that's an extension of Buried in Treasures. So after the Buried in Treasures groups ends, if the participants want, they can keep meeting with one another and not let the experience end at 16 weeks. We have an art therapy group. That's the only one that happens in person. The rest are virtual. We have a positive psychology and hoarding group that helps people develop the skills to keep a positive outlook and know how to overcome obstacles in their work because it can be a long, challenging process. We have a drop-in support group, which is just a once a month. Anyone can come for an hour and talk about whatever they want. And then Clutters Anonymous is not something that we run, but it's a anonymous group where people can show up and interact with one another. And then we have a support for loved ones group. So how to help people who are in proximity to those who are hoarding, because that can come with its own challenges as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about ways that we engage with people who are hoarding. Since we want to take a person-centered approach, it's really important that we build rapport and trust with the people that we're working with, and that they feel comfortable opening up and not feeling like they have to hide things about themselves. So action words, this refers to like, tell me more about this item or show me what you're talking about. So words that help them go into action to explain better what they're trying to communicate. Curious questioning is like, maybe if you don't understand why someone is keeping something or what the challenge they're going through is, instead of like getting angry at them, asking more about it. Can you tell me more about why this item is important to you? Empathetic statements. Someone who's hoarding may be experiencing a lot of distress because of the state of their home, and that can be a really challenging thing. So like, I hear you saying this and it sounds challenging. Can you tell me more about it? So allowing yourself to step into their shoes for a little and hear what's going on. And then statements of concern. So I'm concerned that this part of your home isn't safe for this reason, and I'm concerned, and that's why I want to support you. All right, and then last, I'll go over some do's and don'ts about best practices for working with people who are hoarding. So do use language and descriptions that clients use themselves. So some people may refer to themselves as a hoarder. Other people don't really like that word or that term. They may call themselves a collector. So or they may call their things clutter. So whatever words someone is using, try to follow their lead and use language that's appropriate. Do consider safety first rather than discarding items. So again, the priority is that they're safe, not that we get rid of items. So it's more important to consider like how we can build safety with them than how we can discard something. Do identify strengths rather than barriers, and use positive and encouraging language. Don't use language that can be perceived as judgmental or negatively define their possessions. So something that I might perceive of as trash might not be someone else's trash. So trying to make sure that you're using language that that doesn't dismiss their experiences in that way. And then don't engage in a power struggle. So if they don't want to throw something away or they don't want to discard something, rather than get in a fight with them about it, it's best to move on to the next thing, because that power struggle can harm the rapport. And then last, don't touch personal possessions without permission. And that's all we have. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Great, and thank you, Gabe and Jasmine, some really good tips there. And it helps us to get into the mind of, of a hoarder and the caregiver also. And I wanted to ask about when you were just saying the do's and don'ts. One of the things when I look at hoarders again, I see, like, I don't understand sometimes why, we want to like shake the person and say, snap out of it. There aren't supposed to be mouse droppings in your refrigerator. Your bathtub shouldn't be filled with stuff. But what are some ways we can do as caregivers to, show empathy and compassion to what, people are going through?
Yeah, personally, I might use some of those like ACEs from this ACEs slide. So with the example you gave, like, I'm concerned about the mouse droppings in your refrigerator because that could lead to some real health problems with your food. Can you help me understand like why you're keeping on to food in your refrigerator that's no longer good or that's causing health issues? Like, it must be really important to you to hold on to it. Can you help me understand why? So yeah, I have the similar feeling of like, it's frustrating, but just trying to like lead with curiosity first to give them a chance to explain what's going on.
Thank you. So, do we have any questions for Jasmine or Gabe? I think we have one from right across from me. Uh-oh, a ton of questions.
Fun
Yes.
together.
Yes. I'll turn this around so you can see Michelle.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, I really don't want to monopolize all of your time. And I'm sure other people have questions, but I have so many questions. So if you want to cut me off and we can talk another time as well, but maybe this would be helpful. So, oh, I'm sorry. I'm Michelle Buller. I'm the volunteer coordinator with ElderNet. So I've been with ElderNet for 2.5 years, and throughout my work here at ElderNet, I've experienced all different kinds of people and all different kinds of situations. And I have some specifics because one of the big questions that I always have is approaching somebody. So you just went through that, Gabe, with the engagement. But there's many people that are in a situation where, like, I've been in homes where the walls are literally covered in black mold. It's a health hazard. I've been in homes where the smell of cat urine is so overpowering. I had never experienced anything like it before. So at what point, whose responsibility is it to and when, I guess my biggest question is, when do you realize that, okay, this is a really bad living situation, I need to call somebody? But then what happens to that person? They get taken out of their home. Is that emotional trauma going to be more detrimental than leaving them in a physically unsafe? So that is my first question, and it's a big one. Anyone?
Jasmine, you want to take it or should I?
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Okay.
So that's why, well, if it's an initial assessment, that's where you put together their safety plan. Like, it's not the safety plan that we talked about before, like the safety day. It's where you put together who they have for emergency contacts and figuring out if they have a support plan in place, because some of these people don't, because they've been shut in for so long.
Exactly. And the examples that I'm giving you right now have had nobody to call.
Yeah, so we want to figure out, especially like with the black mold and the cat urine, they've probably been living like that for a while. So we need to figure out, what's their safety plan? Like, who do they have? Like, we need to figure out what to do and how to get, a safety plan put in place if they don't have one.
And so would that be something you do? Like, would I call? Okay.
Yeah, because they probably don't have one. If they've been
No.
living like that for a while, they probably do not have one and put in place. So that's where we come in and try and put one in place.
Okay.
Because if you're going to be working in that home, it's not going to be safe for you to be working in that home. And we would go and talk to our supervisors as well and find out, how can we safely work in the home if we can work in that home? Because if we can't work in that home, we've got to figure out, what to do. I haven't had, an issue because there is on the, we have several different assessments. And I think on one of the assessments, there is a question, is there, mold? There isn't a question about there is a question about like animal droppings and feces and stuff like that as well. So they do ask those questions and we have to rate it and things like that. So our supervisor goes over that and looks at that too. So, if there is like a concern, like where it's a really high level, she's gonna probably, talk to us about it. But we haven't had, like, I don't know about Gabe, but I haven't had a client where there was like a huge mold problem or, animal droppings and feces yet. I have a client who does have like animals that sometimes have feces on the ground, but she cleans it up. And if I notice it and it hasn't been cleaned up yet, I ask her to clean it up before we continue on work, or I'll help her. I'm saying, like that's not part of our job, but I'm saying, we should do this before we move on. And she'll go, oh, okay, I can do that, so it really depends on who the worker is and what we want to work on. So, yeah.
And so
putting it
have
in
you,
place.
have you ever experienced a situation or heard of a situation that where the house is, you've been alerted to this and it's inhabitable as far as you're concerned for health reasons? And what do? Do you call APS, like Adult Protective Services at that point? And then what happens to the person if they're a senior and they don't have any support network, family, friends, nothing?
I've worked in a home with a client where I could barely get in the door. And he had like, it was pretty bad. But that's not most of the cases that we work with. I can tell you that.
Mhm.
Where, it, like you could smell it from the hallway, of the building. But it was like, we've had, he had mental health checks, but you have to be careful with those types of things because the trauma there, he had a clean out before. But if you have clean outs with certain clients, that can trigger trauma as well.
Right.
And they with him, he had a clean out before and it wasn't with us. It was his landlord pressured him into having a clean out. He had that clean out. He went back in, went missing for a couple of days because it triggered his trauma. So that's why I was talking about the safety days, why it's so important for you to be a part of that and for the client to be a part of that safety day so they know what's going on, so that they're a part of it and that they're aware of what's going to be taken out and what they can keep, and so that they have some kind of control over it as well. Instead of someone just coming in and taking everything out and then they have no, they're just like, okay, it's clean, but I'm not happy and I don't know what to do, that sort of thing.
Okay, yeah.
I hope I answered your questions.
What's that?
I hope I answered your questions.
You did. You gave me, some direction. And then, so you talked about approaching a person and the whole ACE strategy of engagement and everything. So what, and I, on one of your slides, it was, some of the criteria for a hoarding disorder. Now, at what point, and this is another question, like, is this a judgmental thing? Like, you have somebody that is living in a situation where they've just got a lot of lifelong accumulated stuff. They're willing to get rid of it, but they're so overwhelmed by the prospect of having to go through all of their lifelong accumulation of stuff that they become paralyzed and they can't do it. And it's too much necessarily for like an ElderNet volunteer to go in and help, because this might be, quite monumental and it's already daunting to the person who owns the stuff, let alone to a volunteer. So would there be services available to those people who are like, I want help, I need help getting rid of my stuff, but they might not be able to necessarily afford like a bio one, and it might not be covered under insurance. So how do you help those people?
I mean, they can call JFCS if they're in one of the counties that we serve, which are Philadelphia, Bucks, Chester, Montgomery, Delaware. Did I miss Delaware? Gabe, did I say Delaware? I think it's Delaware. Those are the 5 counties that we serve right now. There is a waiting list, unfortunately, but it's good to still be put on the wait list. So that's one avenue that they can take, so that they can see one of us one-on-one when they're ready. And we can start that process that way. And like we just went over, we do the motivational interviewing, the CBT, we go out to the homes. And another way, if they're not willing to wait for that, or they're figuring that, hey, I'm ready to at least start getting some help now, they can do the support groups that we offer. That's much quicker. That's not hands-on, but at least they could start there, doing the buried in treasures and art therapy, maybe if they want to see someone face-to-face, but outside of the home.
And that's actually leads me to another question that I had about the support groups. I mean, what if you're talking about somebody who hasn't really acknowledged the fact that they have a problem? I mean, how do you get them into a support group if they don't think they need support?
We've had clients like that. I mean, I would just say, like, if they're even a little bit remotely interested, I would just say, give them the flyer, to check out the group. We have people just check out a group once to see what it's about.
Okay.
If they're not ready, they're not ready. You can't force it.
Right.
I was gonna say, like, pitch the group in a different way. Like, maybe they don't consider themselves to have a hoarding disorder per se, but like, this is a group that helps you like manage your clutter, clean your home, or like find out strategies. So that's one way that you could
That's a good idea.
advertise it a little bit differently.
Thanks, Gabe. Yeah.
And I was going to say one other thing about your previous question. If someone has a lot of things and they don't have like a hoarding disorder, then they could also consider like a professional organizer or someone like that. If like a hoarding disorder isn't the issue that they have.
Okay. Yep. I told you I had a lot of questions.
Oh, contact information. Should I put that in the chat, or should I just
You
say
could put
that?
it in the chat and then we'll say it again at the end and
Okay,
get the
sure.
website out. Yeah, and I know Gabe might have to jump off, but we definitely want to fit Annie in, because she has a lot to tell us
Right.
also about her experiences. Michelle says she has more questions, so we're going to have those at the end or connect offline if we run out of time. So
Okay,
thank you again,
thanks.
Jasmine and Gabe.
No problem.
Thank you. I'm sure I will be connecting with you at some point.
No problem.
I'm gonna have to hop off, but thank you.
So now to wrap it all up for us, and I'm really interested to hear her perspective, is Annie Amoon Richard, who is the owner of Amoon's Custom Organizing, which is unsuffocating the world one space at a time, moving you from overwhelmed to organized. Annie specializes in helping seniors who are preparing to move and people who exhibit hoarding behaviors. Annie is a certified professional organizer and holds level 1 certifications in chronic disorganization and hoarding with the Institute for Challenging Disorganization. Annie is a member of the Exton Region Chamber of Commerce, the Keys Guild, Faithful Organizers, and is a Golden Circle member of the National Association of Productivity and Organizing Professionals, or NAPO. That's a mouthful. Annie lives in, yes. She lives in Westchester County and serves people in the surrounding communities of Chester, Delaware, Montgomery, and Berks counties, and also in Northern Delaware. So take it away, Annie.
Okay, thank you for having me. That was all good information, Jasmine and Gabe. And it saved me from having to say all that, which is good. I could talk all day about hoarding. I've been a professional organizer for 20 plus years. My mom is a hoarder, and I didn't even know she was a hoarder till after I became a professional organizer. And I'm one of 7 children, and we lived in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house. So 9 people living in a small house. It was crowded. And it wasn't until after we all grew up and moved out and I started learning more about hoarding that I kind of connected the dots and realized it wasn't just there was a lot of people. It was my mom liked to hoard stuff. So I can see both sides of it. I do specialize in helping people who hoard. There's not enough people helping this population, and I'm on a quest to change that. As Tom said, we're both on the Chester County Hoarding Task Force together, which started in 2016 by the Department of Aging here in Chester County. And it kind of fizzled for lack of funds, and then kind of went to nothing. And then, of course, the pandemic. And so I've taken it upon myself to kind of try to get it going again. So we started meeting again in January, and we're meeting quarterly. So we met in January, we met in April, and we're going to meet July 13th. So we have a handful of people that are interested in getting it going. And our main goal is to find funds sources so that we can actually get stuff done rather than just talk about it. All right. There is help and there is hope for people who hoard. A lot of people think it's a lost cause. Oh, those people won't change, so why bother? It'll just go right back. And in a sense, they're correct based on the strategies that have been used in the past, that if you just do a forced clean out, you're not solving the problem. You're just dealing with the symptoms and nothing is going to change. If anything, the hoard comes back faster and greater after a forced clean out. You have to deal with what the mental health issues are, because it's not about the stuff. It really isn't about the stuff. It is a recognized mental illness, and it's not a character defect. So it's not that there's necessarily something wrong with the person inherently. It's that they have a mental health issue. It's not a logical disease. So all the things that people try to logically deal with it do not work. And so we have to educate people on what does work and get them to see past the hoard initially and deal with the person. So your language is important. And that's why a lot of people with this mental illness do not like to be called a hoarder. That's like calling a cancer patient, oh, you're breast cancer. If you wouldn't do that. So why do we do it with people who hoard? There are emotional needs that are being met by the hoard. And if we can find out what those needs are and meet them in a healthier way, then the hoard's not as important, because it really isn't about the stuff. It is typically triggered by trauma and loss. It's usually something in their past that has happened to them beyond their control. It could be a car accident where now they can't do the work they always did, and now their life changes drastically. It could be their child got killed in a car accident, was murdered, whatever. It could be that they were physically assaulted at one point or another. It could be that their house burned down and they lost everything, and they know what that feels like. For my mom, we trace it back to when she was 12. She came home from school one day and her mom had given away her dolls and her paper dolls and all the things that my mom liked to play with. Her mom was basically, yeah, you're too old for that. You don't need this anymore. I gave them to the neighbors. And it wasn't so much that it was the dolls, it was about my mom didn't have a say in it. She wasn't asked. She had no warning that it was going to happen. It was just she came home and, it was decided for her. And to this day, it's not about what the stuff is. It's the fact that it's mom's. And you have to ask her, is it okay if I, throw away this paper bag? Is it okay that, I get rid of this? And most of the time she'll say no, it's not okay. But I'm working on her and she's learning. But so it's not, you got to find out through the motivational interviewing, through the curious questions. It can't be an interrogation, like, what's wrong with you? How come you're doing this? This is not good. You can't live like this, blah, blah, blah. All the judgments that we heap on these people. You have to kind of get them to trust you person to person. Let me hear what your life experiences have been about. What did you do for a living? Where have you lived? Are your children still, all the curious questions to kind of find out what their traumas are. Sometimes the clinicians know, oh, they've been evicted 3 times already. They already own 2 other houses that are full. There's some information that you get when you find out about a person. But the more you can learn about their backstory, the more you can understand, how they got to where they're at and how to fix it. You got to get them to look ahead, not behind. If they're looking back at their traumas and they have that victim mindset of all this has happened to me and I'm not going to let people, steamroll me anymore, then they're not going to cooperate. But if you get them to see, hey, did you realize that when we clean out your apartment, you can live a better life? Like, what are your bucket list goals? What would you like to see? And get them looking forward rather than back. You're going to get further faster. So you get them to see that their future can be better and that they have control to some degree over that future. As Tom was saying, it's very crisis driven. So a lot of times by the time we get called in, there's already been a crisis and we're part of the cleanup crew. But you have to be able to give them some control as much as possible over what gets decided. There's some things that they can't change, right? If they're facing eviction, if you want to avoid being evicted, then you have to play along to some degree, but you have some control as to how that plays out. So the more you can give them that control, the better. It has to be person first and the hoard second, or you're not going to, because under all the stuff is a hurting person. They're hurting from some trauma, and you need to figure out what that is first and deal with the repercussions of that before you can touch a box. There is hope, and that's a critical part of changing behaviors, because if they don't see hope, then why bother? And unfortunately, that's what happens is they get overwhelmed and then they get immobilized. They lose hope. They get more depressed. And it's just a downward spiral. A lot of times when people are depressed, what do? They do the retail therapy, right? I'll go buy something. I'll feel better, right? And then they buy something. They come home. They don't know where to put it. It gets thrown into the pile. Pile gets bigger, then they go, oh, look at this, I'm in a mess. What a horrible person I am. I feel terrible. I'm going to go shopping. And it's very easy to get stuff in our society. You can shop online and have it there the next day. There's all kinds of free, you can get stuff for free without even barely trying. So it's real easy. So you got to get them to see that there's hope and things can be different. A lot of times you're not going to get people to change overnight, and you're not going to get them to get rid of their stuff. As a professional organizer, when I go into a home, they're deathly afraid that I'm going to give them the finger. You have to, you gotta, you should get rid of all of this. It's all junk and it all has to go. And it's like, no, the first thing I tell them is, look, everything is here It's physically taking up space, so it fits in your home. So you don't necessarily have to get rid of anything, and you can actually feel the tension go out of them because they're so sure that I'm going to make them empty the house. And that's not always the case. Now, if it's a safety issue, right? The safety is more of a, I call it like Sweden. It's neutral. It's not a judgment. It's clear what's safe and what's not safe. And so if you can focus on that and say, look, all we need to do is create a 3-foot wide path from your front door to your kitchen, from your kitchen to your living room to your bedroom to your bathroom. You can live safely. So let's focus on that. And then you're not starting the process from a kind of like a punitive, you're being punished because you have too much stuff. And I'm the gate person with the whip saying you have to, you gotta, you should. You go in saying, let's just make it safe. Let's start there. And there's actually, as far as a resource on the Philadelphia Hoarding Task Force website, there's a resource called Initial Benchmarks. And it's basically a checklist of 8 goals to reduce risk and improve safety. And so that's kind of where we start. And they are clear 3 feet wide pathways throughout the home, including hallways and stairs. Reduce piles to no more than 4 feet above the floor. I usually go to the chin level of the person. Don't stack anything higher than your chin. Reduce all piles near windows to below windowsill height and keep windows accessible so they can be opened. That's a safety thing if you had to get out in a fire. Keep all doors clear of belongings so that they can be opened freely. Front door is the most important one. Keep the stove and oven clear of all clutter so that the oven door can open completely. Keep paper and other flammable materials at least 1 foot from the stove. So all that can be measured. You can take a ruler and say, okay, that's 1 foot. A lot of times I'll put tape, either red, it can be the painter's tape, it can be duct tape. Here's that 1 foot mark. It's a visual. Don't cross this line. Put anything close on your stove. Keep belongings at least 1 foot away from heaters, heating equipment, and hot water heaters and electrical panels. Regularly remove rotting food containers, and garbage from the home. And keep outlets, surge protectors, and extension cords clear of clutter. Do not run extension cords across piles or pathways. Once you've got those 8 things covered, you're well on your way to a healthy and safe home. And if your home has structural, electrical, plumbing, or infestation issues, then there will be some additional steps to take to ensure a healthy and safe home. A lot of times when I'm called in, I go in and I kind of do a quick assessment. Is this safe for me to be here? If it's not safe for me to be here, whether because it's air quality or, rotting food or vermin or whatever, then I'll usually call Tom in. I'll say, look, before I can even start, you need to have a biohazard company come in and deem that it's safe. Not only for me, not that I'm being a diva or a prima donna, it's that you need to be safe too. And if you're not safe, you shouldn't be living here. So sometimes condemnation is the first logical step that needs to happen, because it's one that they, even though it's drastic, gets their attention that this is clearly not safe. And you need to get them to see that they deserve a safe environment, because a lot of times these people are so beaten down by life that they feel like trash. And that's some of the extreme hoarders that don't throw away obvious trash is because they feel like trash and they know what that feels like. And so they kind of put those qualities on their stuff and they go, I'm not going to hurt the trash's feelings because I know what it feels like to be trash. And so it doesn't make sense to the person from the outside looking in, but when you see it from their point of view, based on the traumas that have happened to them and how society has treated them, that you can almost see their logic and go, yeah, I can see your point. But if you can build up their self-esteem and get them to see that they're a human being, and just because of that fact alone, they deserve to live in a clean, safe environment, then a lot of times you can get them to throw away the trash a lot easier than if you went, you have to, you gotta, you should, what's the hell's wrong with you? You know, so it's kind of meeting them where they are, understanding where they are, and then helping them get to where they want to be. Because a lot of times they don't like living in filth. Nobody would. But it's because their thinking has gotten twisted because of their traumas that they're living like they are. And you need to help them bail out. There's also, for people that go in and do assessments, there's actually a tool that's been developed by a Christina Bradiotis, and it's called the Holmes tool. And it's an objective, multidisciplinary hoarding risk assessment. It's a two-sided page, basically. I don't know if you can see it, but and you can also get a copy of that on the Philadelphia Hoarding Task Force website, which is philadelphiahoarding.org, I believe. It might be .com. I'd have to look. But if you Google Philadelphia Hoarding, you'll find the task force. And it basically is the acronym HOMES for health, obstacles, mental health, endangerment, and structure and safety. And it's simply a checklist. It's something anybody can do without having a big background in social work or psychology or mental illness or even organizing. And it's simply quick questions. Cannot use bathtub or shower? Yes or no? Cannot access the toilet. There's garbage or trash overflow. Can't prepare food, can't sleep in bed, etc., etc. Obstacles is cannot move freely or safely in the home. Inability for EMT to gain access. That's actually where that 3-foot wide rule came from, because that's the width of a gurney to get in their house. Unstable piles and egresses, exits, or vents blocked or unusable, which is windows usually. Mental health. Now, we're not mental health professionals. We can't diagnose. This is simply to identify risk factors. Does not seem to understand the seriousness of the problem. Clearly it's hoarded, and you go in and they go, problem? What problem? There's no problem. Doesn't seem to accept the likely consequences. You know, maybe they've been evicted before. They don't care if they're going to be evicted again. That's not a big deal to them. You know, whether they're defensive or angry, whether they're anxious or apprehensive about you even coming in the door. And they don't seem aware or alert, or they seem very confused. Endangerment. You know, you think of the threat to themselves, you know, the safety of a child or a minor that might live there, or an older adult. Sometimes there's an older person living there in squalor, and the person, supposedly their caregiver, couldn't care less. And they're like, there's no issue here. The health and safety of animals. A lot of the animal hoarders, yes, they may love animals, but clearly not to the point that they're concerned about their safety or their welfare, because obviously these animals are living in filth and, you know, not safe, not healthy. And they may be a threat to their neighbors, you know, with a common wall or their yard stuff. And then the structural stuff, the unstable floors, leaking roof, caving walls, no heat, no running water, blocked vents, you know, storage of hazardous materials. It's amazing what people will live with, and the solutions they come up with, like you know, using the 5-gallon bucket for a toilet, you know, all kinds of things. They wash their dishes in a bathroom sink because the plumbing in the kitchen doesn't work, or you can't get into the kitchen. And then the backside is the household composition. It's more the demographic information, the number of adults, the ages, children, kinds of pets, the number of pets. Does someone in the home smoke? Are there physical disabilities? You know, is there a threat of eviction? You know, what's the crisis point? And then the capacity measurements. Are they aware? Are they willing to acknowledge that there's a problem? Do they have the physical ability to clear clutter? Do they have the psychological ability to clear clutter? And are they have a willingness to accept the intervention assistance? And then any other notes, and you date it, you fill it out. And it's basically a quick It's a quick assessment tool that pretty much anybody can use. And again, it's non-judgmental, it's objective. Let's see. So those were the basic notes. Yes, the Philadelphia Hoarding website is philadelphiahoarding.org. And then there's challengingdisorganization.org. I put it in the chat. They have a stages of change document. They have a lot of, they're called fact sheets. They're under resources on their website. And when you understand all the stages of change, you can kind of figure out what stage they're at. And they may not be ready to, here's a number, call. They may not be ready for that. But if you give them the number, at least they'll have it. So when they are ready, they know who to call. So just understanding that can be helpful. I'm not sure what time the meeting ends. I'm assuming 3:30 and we're getting really close. So I have been on the Hoarders TV show. I filmed 3 episodes, 2 of which have already aired, 1 which has not yet aired. And people usually have a lot of questions around that. I can stay past 3:30 if people want to. And that's basically it.
Annie, thank you so much.
You're
That was
welcome.
really illuminating to hear, about your own take. And I could tell, I can hear the passion in your voice when you talk about, and I think it's because of your mom.
Mhm.
That, yeah. And, while we have the time, maybe like 2 more minutes or so, I know Unstufficated is your website, but you're also working on a book.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Can you let us know quickly
Sure.
about that?
The book is basically going to be geared towards the family of people who hoard, because there's so much anger, there's so much frustration, there's so much not help. They've tried everything they think is logic to do. They've done the forced cleanouts. They've thrown away stuff behind the hoarder's back. They've, made ultimatums like, if you don't clean up, I'm going to divorce you. I don't know if any of you watched the show, but you've seen all the family drama that comes out of this disorder. And so they give up. They basically say, fine, the relationships are severed. The adult kids or the brothers and sisters or whoever the loved ones are, just go away, throw up their hands and say, we'll deal with it when she dies. And they're so angry because a lot of the hoarding help goes to the adult children and says, how can you let your mom live like that? There's judgments like, why didn't you do something sooner? How did you let it get this bad? And they feel incredibly judged. And they're like, what are you talking about? I've been pulling my hair out, trying every which way to do something. Nothing works. And it's not my problem. I give up, and there's a lot of anger, resentment, frustration, and yet they love these people and nobody's helping them. The hoarder comes to them and say, oh, it's a mental health issue. You need to be understanding. You need to be compassionate. You need to be empathetic. And they're like, what about me? I had to grow up in this stuff and nobody's helping me. So my book is going to be geared towards helping them and helping them to understand pretty much what I covered real quickly in the 15 minutes or so that I had. But getting them to see that it's not a character flaw and that they need to deal with the issues, because usually it's unresolved trauma, and it may be from their childhood. It may be from their grandparents, grew up in hoarding or were hoarders, and it got passed along. The more I learn about it, I look at my family tree and it's full of hoarders. I didn't realize it when I was a kid going over to my aunt's house. She had 40 cats. It was like she was a cat lady before it was cool. It was like, I didn't know. It was just my crazy loving aunt that had cats, But so that's what my book is going to be geared towards, is helping them to see what to do that might work or work better, and what not to do, what they've already tried that hasn't worked, and here's why. And it's not something wrong with them that it didn't work. It's just human nature why it didn't work. So yeah, it's interesting. And the more I learn about it, the more I want to learn about it, because it's a fascinating field and nobody's really helping. to the degree that it needs to. So,
Well, while we're seeing if there are any more last questions, did you want to give the audience in the Zoom room and the Facebook Livers your contact information? The best way to find out?
yeah, my website is www.unstufficated.com, and that's spelled UNSTUFF like stuff, ICATED.com. My email is unstufficated@gmail.com. My phone number is 484-250-9921. And you can find that also at the website. I love to speak about hoarding. So if there's any groups out there that need a speaker to speak on this, I've been speaking at retirement communities, community groups. There's a link that is helps people from Chester, Montgomery, and Bucks County. I did a 3-hour training on hoarding for them back in March, and I'm scheduled to do another one in September. So I love to talk about it. I'm learning more and more about it. I'm going to the Institute for Challenging Disorganization has their annual conference in September up in the Boston area. I'm signed up to attend that. To get back to your point earlier about the show, real quick, it is reality TV. Very little of it is staged for staging's sake. They're taking 4 very intense days that the organizing crew is there and boiling it down to 2 hours. And before we even show up as the clean out crew, the psychologist, Dr. Tolan, has been there, or there's several different psychologists that work on the show. But Dr. Tolan is in the forefront of a lot of the hoarding research and has written a lot of the books. I think he's even part of the Buried in Treasures book. He's met with the family and gone over some of the family dynamics that they address on the show. So what you're seeing on the show is like the highlights that make good TV, so that people like watching a train wreck, unfortunately. But trust me, in the background, the show is doing all kinds of work with the family. They offer aftercare services so they can work with a professional organizer after the show leaves, and also with a psychologist after the show leaves. So it's an interesting experience, but there are a lot of people that live like that. Several years ago, I heard a statistic that the show gets over 10,000 applications a month to be on the show. And that's families that are saying, I'm agreeing to be on a show and show our family problems, pretty much airing our dirty laundry on national television. They're willing to do that. And so for that many people to be willing to do that, there's tens of thousands of people in the same situations that wouldn't willingly be on TV. So I'm happy to answer any other questions.
I will definitely continue to keep watching, and I think you have some new viewers now, because it is, like you said, it's a train wreck, but a compassionate train wreck, because
Right.
there always is some sort of healing at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for what you do. Thank you for being here today.
No problem.
Thank you, Tom and Jasmine and Gabe, and anyone who wants to reach out to Annie, feel free to reach out to me if you didn't catch her contact information. But on behalf of the ElderNet Advocacy Committee, we'd like to thank you again for attending the town hall, and this recording will be available on our website shortly, so stay tuned for that, and also on Facebook Live. So thank you again, everyone.
Thank you. All right, take care.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, bye.